Welcome back to round 3 of DreamHack HCT Grand Prix Montreal. I'm Lorinda and I'm going to bring this with you with the second highest win rate player in the room. It's Dr. J.
Whew, I love that shout out. You know, you gotta have the ego get a little big a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I like to cast with the second. I've cast with world champions, I've cast with people like you. I sometimes get to legend.
Yeah, you know, I love that you throwing those little stats out there. That's something you've been doing so good at, Lorinda, is just showing these players and how consistent they are, just making sure that their stats are out there, because there are some players that may not be the most popular player on, you know, the system, the HCT system, but they have some incredible performances.
Yeah, I mean, players like Muzzy, who we may or may not see in just a moment, 5 top 16s. Top 16s is a metric I'm using to track most of these players, because it's the one that says, yeah, they did all right. And then if you get a hunter ace thrown in there, sometimes you go, okay, let's go for top 4s, because it just shows how ridiculously good they are. But Muzzy, of course, won this event last year. This was a big deal last year. It helped him wipe out Zalay and get the points he needed to get into last call. And last year's final was interesting, actually, because we totally ignored Seung. Like, we blanked the guy, unfortunately, because he was playing against Muzzy, who needed to win to get to last call. We cared.
Yeah, the crazy part about that story last time was just the fact that, you know, there were 2 main players competing for the last call, and that was Zalay and Muzzy, and both of them were neck and neck, point for point, and then Zalay got knocked out in the top 16, and Muzzy proceeded to win the event, and with that, Muzzy basically took it by storm and had, I believe, 20 to 30 more points than Zalay. Zalay kind of just said, you know what, you've got it, Muzzy. I can't really compete with that. Yeah. You go ahead and be the last call winner for this second year, or maybe even third year.
I think this might be the 3rd year. Muzzy has already won 1 tournament this year. He's
insane.
On track to do it again. Just going to quickly finish a shout out to Seung, because we blanked him. We didn't really know much about him. He has since made 4 top 16s himself this year.
He's another very consistent player.
We probably should have heard of him back then, but we cared so much about the Muzzy story. You know, he didn't get the credit he deserved. Hopefully he's going well here when we get the standings update later. But we are going to look at Muzzy versus Monsanto in this first match of round 3. Muzzy has already won a Copa this year. Monsanto's already got a 2nd place in Buenos Aires. Pretty good year around for these.
Yeah, both these players have been doing very well, very successful, and we even go back to DreamHacks of the past year. We look at DreamHack Denver. Both of these players made the top 8. I believe Muzzy made top 8. Monsanto made top 4. I actually had to play against him in that tournament.
Oh, you did quite well in that tournament, didn't you?
Yeah, that was another good little tournament for Dr. J. I mean, but Monsanto and Muzzy, just very consistent players in what they do. You know, the decks, the strategies they bring. Monsanto is typically known for his more control approach, and Muzzy is a very aggressive player by heart, I would say, and he does very well with, you know, those tempo-based rogues, those odd-based rogues that are just so powerful in the current meta, and we actually see him bringing that odd rogue to the tournament, and Monsanto staying true to the warrior, bringing that odd warrior.
Awesome. Yeah, so as I wake myself up, odd warrior is actually not that bad until you get the mirrors. Monsanto also, and Muzzy to some degree too, known for doing it their own way. Like, Monsanto doesn't always necessarily bring the meta deck. In fact, he often just brings whatever 30 cards he found under his sofa that morning.
Yeah, it's actually funny, because I think there was a story about Monsanto for the last playoffs he went to. Monsanto had finally got tired of, you know, bringing those wacky lineups and maybe doing semi-successful, but not necessarily winning the entire tournament. And we were joking with him. He said, you know, Monsanto, you finally brought that lineup. You finally brought that, you know, meta-defining lineup that has all the popular meta decks. And I think that was the worst playoffs he performed in. So I think it was actually more beneficial to Monsanto if he just kept going with the crazy decks.
Well, let's have a look what he has brought today. We've got the picks and bans for you in just a moment. And when they come on screen, let's have a look at if Monsanto's gone crazy or is he being a normal human being today.
I know, that is the question of the weekend. But I believe with this lineup, we have the token druid on both sides. Both sides have an even warlock. The rogue from Monsanto is a quest rogue. The rogue from Muzzy is an odd rogue. And then Muzzy is packing that Death Rattle Hunter, and Monsanto is packing that odd control warrior. So I'd say, you know, from Muzzy's approach, he has this it has a combination of aggressive and mid-range decks. He's got 2 mid-range decks in the form of that even warlock, and also from the Hunter deck, and then he's got the two other aggressive decks with the Druid and the Rogue, whereas, you know, Monsanto kind of went for more of a control approach. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of pairs up with one another.
And despite having the odd Rogue in his lineup, Muzzy wanting nothing to do with that Quest Rogue. We just saw Fino there,
Yes.
what that deck can do. Just don't want anything to do with it in this current meta, even against the aggro, apparently.
Yeah, I think Muzzy had already dedicated his ban to that Quest Rogue because he does have decks like that Even Warlock and that Hunter that will struggle so much. And Monsanto actually opts to ban out that Even Warlock. Maybe, you know, Monsanto was doing his research a little bit, noticed that Muzzy was tending to ban Quest Rogue anyways. So if Quest Rogue's banned, you might as well get rid of one of the decks that Quest Rogue was favorable against.
Yeah.
And now Monsanto has that Odd Warrior paired into Token Druid and Odd Rogue, which is a very favorable matchup for both ends. The Token Druid matchup's a little bit arguable. I would say that a lot of players have been debating that back and forth, but it's still just a very strong deck overall. I think the only way, you know, maybe it loses is if the Token Druid either has that amazing start or the Death Rattle Hunter gets queued into it.
Yeah, the Token Druid can get it done against Warrior, but it's very difficult. If it just decides to launch into it on like turn 4 and say, okay, have you got it now? Because I know you're going to have it later. Sometimes they just don't have it. There are ways of making the Warrior use up resources, but Monsanto, probably way too good to fall for any trickery. We'll probably need a bad draw if that's going to happen in that match.
Yeah, it also depends on the tech choices as well, because a lot of the Odd Warriors, they've been cutting Whirlwind, and Whirlwind is one of those cards you can couple with a Brawl in order to clear up the board states that the Token Druid can create. So if Monsanto's not playing the Whirlwind, I would say that it's a little bit better for the Token Druid. But, you know, Reckless Flurry, Brawls, Dinomatic, you name it, there's a card to clear a board.
So we are ready to get into the first game of this mammoth matchup. Whoever wins this will sleep well tonight because they'll be at worst 3-1. They're currently 2-0, just the 4 rounds today. So let's get on with the action and see if Muzzy can keep up his strong run.
And there we see that matchup immediately. I don't think Muzzy was ever going to queue the Hunter first, because if Muzzy queues the Hunter into, say, something like the Druid, loses that matchup, and then Monsanto still has that Warrior up, that could have spelled a lot of trouble for him. But so you see him just go ahead and queue that first, and Monsanto actually gets that queue of the Odd Warrior into the Druid. It's going to be interesting to see, you know, how this game pans out. It's going to depend a lot on the tech choices that both these players have decided to bring. We've seen some Token Druids recently go for, you know, more of a taunt package. They're starting to play Serenite Chain Gang and Strong Shell Scavenger in order to, you know, just have a little bit more consistent game against aggressive decks.
Well, how do you feel about that new package? I'm still not sure on it. I know that a lot of people are still playing the old one, and it's because it's new, people are not sure whether it's actually better than the Violet Teacher package or whether it is just because the new deck is better. It's hard to tell sometimes.
I would say that this new package kind of gives Muzzy the room to make stronger plays onto the board. For instance, you do have Phlebidnus Floop, and with Phlebidnus Floop, it allows you to, you know, effectively have just another board state to create. If it copies a Giggling Inventor, if it copies a Serenite Chain Gang, or if it, you know, even if it copies something like a Strong Shell Scavenger after you had already played a Spreading Plague Strong Shell, that's just more pressure you can put onto the board. I've been playing with this list a little bit on ladder, and I think it is very, very powerful.
Yes, I mean, anytime you can just get a strong meta-defining card like Floop into your deck by not changing too much about what the deck does, seems like it's likely to be an improvement. Like I said, I'm not convinced myself, but only because I haven't seen millions of games of it yet. It's certainly not a bad deck. It's certainly doing very well. And Muzzy seems to often, if he brings this sort of deck to tournaments, he tends to get the right one, let's face it.
Yeah, it's actually funny because Muzzy was one of the first players to ever experiment and play this Token Druid.
I remember, yeah.
And that was a long time ago. That was the, I believe, the playoffs from last meta.
At least it may have even been before that, I think.
I think so. And the original prototype list, as you'd like to call it, ended up playing Sea Giants. And it tried to capitalize on playing the Sea Giants, but ever since then, you know, it got cut for more consistent cards because you really only need 1 to 2 board states to end out a lot of matchups.
And the matchups where it's not enough, you need 26 and you can't get them anyway, like this one, for instance.
Exactly.
Well, another thing that he did, when he first built that deck, it was regarded as a bit of a meme, like most new decks are, because you don't know them, therefore they must be a meme, because otherwise I'd have invented it. And he hung out in people's chats who were playing the deck. I remember Bork on Troll going, this deck doesn't beat this, and Muzzy's like, well, you didn't keep the such and such, why didn't you do it this way? And then he went around everybody's chats explaining why they were playing it wrongly and why it's actually a good deck. And now here we are, 3 months later, and it's one of the staple decks of the format.
I think it's actually probably one of those brought decks. It really fills that role in Last Hero Standing that you're trying to do. It is a very good anti-aggressive deck. It does very well against those aggressive decks, while also being fairly strong against the majority of the control decks. I would say Warrior is one of those, you know, kind of 50-50 zones where, you know, if they're playing Warpath, you lose to that one card right there. But if they're not, then you do have a chance. It's going to be an uphill battle, but you definitely have a chance.
And the reason we haven't mentioned what is going on the board state is A, you can see that for yourselves, and B, nothing much happens in these early turns. The only decision to make is, do you want to play Whispering Woods on 4 or 3 if you have the coin? Monsanto kept a card, so that changes that plan right from the start. There's no point even bothering to try that plan, even if you had it in your mind. And so we are waiting now until Muzzy wants to try and develop his first board. One of the problems the Warrior has is if it wants to exert pressure. It's in no hurry, it doesn't need to exert pressure. But if it ever wants to speed the game up at all to stop Muzzy maybe having 2 pairs of combo in his hand, he can't do too much because then he gives him a good spreading play, which actually gives him another board fill. So Monsanto has to just tiptoe around, and Muzzy's letting Monsanto's hand fill up with stuff. Maybe forcing him to put more stuff on the board.
Yeah, so it's going to be very slow during these early turns, like you were mentioning, Lorenda. But, you know, a lot of times you kind of want to fit in as many hero powers as possible, just to, you know, if there ever is that game state where maybe you don't necessarily have that answer, you have enough armor to kind of make sure that you're pretty safe off, even if there is something like 1 to 2 Savage Wars. You can kind of survive that damage. But if you're Monsanto, the biggest thing I would say with this current hand is trying to find a way to get to those cards as quickly as possible, like the Brawl, and also trying to make sure that you have as much armor and not playing in a Spreading Plague as possible. The way you lose this matchup most of the time is by playing in a Spreading Plague, and Spreading Plague gets in way too much damage.
Yeah, just making sure he plays things now so his hand doesn't overload. Like you say, the Spreading Plague getting in the damage is the problem. Because even if you get hit once, you were referring to this a minute ago, if you hit once by a Spreading Plague and by a Savage Roar or whatever, the first hit doesn't usually kill you just because you have so much armor. And you can usually brawl away the second hit. Those situations come about when you don't have too much AoE too early. So before 10 mana, so you can't brawl twice or whatever. And sometimes you can just get hit in the face. But it just isn't going to kill him anyway. But Muzzy has committed 0 to this game so far. Now his hand is full. He's going to have to start working out, what's my first board going to be? The one that I don't mind if it's wiped out. Because let's face it, the first board's getting wiped out.
And even playing, you know, Spreading Plague into an Arcane Tyrant just to get cards out of the hand, this is a very weak play to the current board state. Monsanto, if he chooses to do so, can just go ahead and put that Super Collider in, get the trade with the Scarab onto the Arcane Tyrant, and then trade off his Nightmare Amalgam into the Arcane Tyrant, clearing up the board, fitting in a hero power, and then just kind of passing the turn.
Yeah, and passing the turn on 40 health with no AoE used and Spreading Plague dealt with. But when you get high-level players playing against each other like this, the Spreading Plague is more of a game of chicken, because Monsanto's not going to play into it, and Muzzy's going to eventually just have to get it out of his hand.
Yeah, and Muzzy has to play these cards in order to be able to use Ultimate Infestation. And if he can't cast Ultimate Infestation when he hits 10 mana, that's when it becomes super awkward. You really can't do much.
I mean, normally, I have this habit of trying to say, Ultimate Infestation's green and you don't need to play it, just because it's something to talk about, to be honest. But this time around, with the hand he has, it may well be that when he gets to 10 mana, he does have enough to do for a little while. Turn 8, he may just be able to load up the first board of stuff. Whispering Woods into Soul of the Forest on 8 might be a thing you can do, and then dump your hand on 9 and UI on 10.
The only unfortunate thing for that is we can actually see that Monsanto does have, you know, just kind of a clear to that. He can go, if Muzzy chooses to go Whispering Woods Soul on the following turn, Monsanto will have enough mana to be able to go Reckless Flurry, Hero Power, Coin, Reckless Flurry. He may not even need Coin at that point. I don't think he even needs the Coin. And that is a full board clear. But this is where it comes to the game state that sometimes Token Druid kind of slides through. Is, let's say Muzzy makes this board state and then makes another one, and Monsanto has no answer to that board state. As we can see, right now Monsanto doesn't have the greatest answer to another board state afterwards. If Monsanto doesn't find that, then Muzzy can capitalize on him having to clear the first Whispering Wood Soul with some very awkward turn. Now, I would say another great potential line of play is just playing out the Dynomatic, using that to clear up a majority of the Wisps, and then using the Reckless Flurry.
Yeah, double Flurry sounds like you're in a bad position for the
position.
rest of the game. Okay, you've cleared it up, but if Muzzy then plays UI and draws the same 2 cards again, then you're in trouble. And I'm even wondering if there's some sort of MC Tech shenanigans with Zola that could set up, I'll take 1 beating and that's that.
There is some potential for that, especially with how much armor is gained. Monsanto could opt to, get some more armor through this Rover and then go for that play we were talking about. Can actually play 2 MC Techs in the turn. But then again, with that play, you have to evaluate, how much potential burst does Muzzy have?
Yeah, I mean, it's
you're
a
playing
lot,
with fire.
right?
Yeah, you're playing with fire if you make that play, and Muzzy has both Savage Ores and Power of the Wild.
And so here we get to find out how he intends to deal with it. This is what you were suggesting. Play the Dynomatic to clear most of it up, flurry away most of the rest. Doing this first so he knows what to put the Rover into.
Yep, no reason to trade the Rover first. Good sequencing on Monsanto's part.
Good timing to play it last turn, knowing this was a possibility too.
And another thing is, Monsanto doesn't necessarily even need to use one of the flurries. He may be thinking about using the Mind Control tech, putting in the Rover, and then just using his weapon in order to clean up majority of the board.
That's a lot of clear, actually, yeah.
Because he may not necessarily even need to do it. Or he could use Ironbeak Owl in order to silence off one of these Wisps. And Ironbeak Owl doesn't get that much value in the matchup. The thing is, though, Monsanto is going to be very wary of how much potential burst damage Muzzy could have. Because, the dumbest thing could happen to Monsanto is that he doesn't full clear this board, and then Muzzy just kills him. And that looks bad forever.
But no, he has decided to save some AoE, and he just doesn't die to this.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like this recognition from Monsanto.
And you can go as low as you like. Well, not as low as you like. You've got to watch for Malfurion and things, but you can go pretty low with this deck. You recover so quickly.
41 health. He's got a lot of health to work with.
If there was an accident here, 41. You're not doing 41. Even if there's an accident here and he miscounted and takes a huge chunk of damage, next turn he has Giggling Venter, tank up, make some trades. Everything's secure again.
Yeah, I think the most damage that Muzzy could potentially do is somewhere in the range of the mid 20s.
30-ish, yeah.
Maybe 30 at the high maximum.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It would have to be 2 Savage Ores and Power of the Wild, which is a lot of damage, but as you can see, Monsanto's at 41, sitting pretty comfortable. And you would rather make sure to have some kind of board state and use that to clear up the board rather than wasting removal when you don't need to use it.
On the other side, talking about wasting stuff and using it when you need to, Muzzy has decided this is a good time to get some damage through while he can. And that takes the pressure off his second reload a little bit, but it's not ideal. And some of this is just having to be spent on clearing up the board, which is even more aggravating for him.
I do think this is good recognition from Muzzy, however. Muzzy understands that he's not going to get any more damage than what he currently will with these cards. He also has to make sure that he has room for the Ultimate Infestation. So by making this play, he pushes a lot of damage and then cleans up his hand to be able to cast Ultimate Infestation on the following turn.
The only problem, and it's not really Muzzy's fault that this is a problem, is it plays beautifully into Reckless Flurry. What better time to flurry than when you're just about to only have 4 armor? But it does put Monsanto into panic mode a little bit. As you say, after this UI, Muzzy might just have everything again.
I mean, to be honest, I don't even think he needs to flurry this. He could just use the weapon, play Giggling Inventor. And the one issue with Giggling Inventor typically is in this matchup, you don't really want to play it because it gives Spreading Plague value. But playing it here means that you can, copy it with the Zola. You can use the Super Collider to clean up 2 minions. And Spreading Plague can only summon 2 tokens.
Yeah.
So this is the most opportune time that Monsanto will have to play the Giggling Inventor. So I really like the recognition from him.
And it's going into turn 10, or mana turn 10.
Exactly, and
so
he knows that Muzzy's cleaned up his hand for that Ultimate
Who's
Infestation.
playing Spreading Plague on turn 10? Play it, see if I care.
Especially when one's already been played, and if you see the other one's gone.
Sure.
Monsanto can become the token druid at that point. Just keep going wide, why not? Monsanto's been playing this extremely well so far.
I mean, Monsanto is just really good at control. I love watching good control players play because I feel that control feels like the easier archetype to play most of the time. And then you watch someone like Monsanto play it, Not necessarily 100% in this game, but just in general. And you think, oh, I'm so bad. This guy does so many different things. And I also like watching Muzzy play aggro. It's the perfect matchup to be watching for the Hearthstone connoisseur.
Yeah, exactly. It's whatever you want to see. You want to see one of the best aggressive players playing an aggro deck, or you want to see one of the best control players play a control deck. There are opportunities for both, and there's a Brawl picked up. Could opt to use the Brawl. I think Monsanto still expects Muzzy to have that Ultimate Infestation in hand. That card's been there for quite some time. But Muzzy's just going to say, you know what? He's trying to force out as much removal as possible on these measly board states. That way, when he does Ultimate Infestation and he draws into, say, Whispering Woods Soul again, he can commit to that, and that will hopefully for Muzzy stick. We can see here that Monsanto has a plethora of options to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, the way he's protected those flurries in particular, now it's brought in the Brawl, which is like the extra life he needs. Very difficult for Muzzy, and he's going to have to make that Giggling Inventor in his hand somehow draw out an AoE spell over the course of this game sometime. But first of all, he's actually got into a board state where he can attack the opponent's face, and Monsanto's not even letting him do that right now.
I mean, Monsanto needs to hold on to these cards. Malfurion is a good draw. Malfurion is one of those cards that you really need in these control matchups. I mean, we can't stress how important these hero cards are for their selective decks. This one in particular not only affects the board state, but gives Muzzy a chance in unfavorable matchups. Because dealing 3 damage a turn is
It doesn't sound a lot, but it's going to be there for at least 10 turns.
It racks up over time.
Suddenly that's 30 damage. It's like, oh, that's how much I started the game with. Okay, I'll take that.
You're right, 10 hero powers.
Yeah, that's it.
enough. Not against Odd Warrior, though.
Yeah, the problem is they've gained 40 armor in that time.
There's a little speed bump in that matchup called the other hero power.
But that is how important it is. It also lowers Monsanto's options with Dr. Boom or whatever if he draws it. It means he may have to keep his armor alive longer than he'd want to. Maybe take some value away from him.
Yeah, Dr. Boom is one of those weird cards sometimes where you have to evaluate whether you even want to play it.
Yeah.
Because the 4 hero power, the 4 armor hero power every turn is very important in a lot of matchups, but sometimes, you know, Dr. Boom hits that hero power that you would rather have, like the 7 armor hero power, or the dealing 1 to all in order to enable a Brawl.
Which is weird, because that's normally the worst one.
Yes, but in this matchup,
but
it's
in this
pretty
matchup,
strong.
you really want it.
Monsanto's, you know, debating whether or not he wants to use one of these clears here. I think he has to use one of them. The question is, what is the most, you know, awkward and clunky one? I wouldn't be surprised to see Brawl come out here, and then just a hero power.
And look what Muzzy's done here. He's managed to, whether he wins or loses the game, he's forced a flurry onto a mediocre board. But Monsanto has the flurry available extra because of how he has previously managed his own resources.
And so now that I saw Monsanto take this play, I like it a whole lot more than using the Brawl. Now, the reason he went for the Reckless Flurry over the Brawl is because in order to activate 2 Reckless Flurries in the same turn, you would need to have armor already created and then hero power again. Well, the issue with that is Muzzy's going to play this game to make sure Monsanto never has that armor to enable that. So Monsanto, recognizing that, uses the Reckless Flurry now in order to make it less awkward on himself later on. That's a great recognition. Something as simple as that can decide this matchup.
Yeah, there are some little uses as well, like Monsanto has used his Rover, which is sometimes really helpful after you've Dr. Boomed, you play your Rover to get yourself the 2 armor to clear off a board of 2/2s. But that's not happening this game. There's no Dr. Boom. He's already used 1 Rover. And so using the flurry while he could. Oh, Muzzy. Now things get really interesting.
They really do. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of players were asking, you know, is Token Druid even favored against Odd Warrior? Especially when they don't run cards like Whirlwind. If Monsanto were to be running something like Whirlwind, it would make the matchup a whole lot more dynamic, where Monsanto can use his removal a little more liberally. But now with this, Monsanto has the removal, but Muzzy is eventually going to make a, you know, mid-range board state that Monsanto cannot answer.
And there's, I mean, I haven't had a chance to look through every deck list for this tournament, but talking around, there's quite a few Whirlwinds out there, which is a nod partly to this matchup being harder than people give it credit for.
I think Whirlwind's a good call for this metagame.
Yeah. Anything else you like it against? Obviously, it's good against Paladin, but forget that.
Yeah, it's good against Paladin. It has its merits against Warlock. Sometimes you want to play that Dynomatic.
Yeah.
But let's say their board state has like 6 or 7 health, then you can Whirlwind away 2 minions and then get the Dynomatic in. I think it does have its merits, but I will say though, sometimes you have to evaluate whether it's worth putting in the deck. And the reason I say that is not necessarily the mirror, but Warrior already beats those aggressive decks a lot of the times. So you're making yourself weaker to other matchups by guaranteeing you get the win against an aggressive matchup.
Rather than just take your favored matchup as it comes and
then try to be better against, say, the Death Rattle Hunter.
Yeah.
This is the mid-range board state I was talking about, Lorinda, where Monsanto doesn't have a great way to answer this, and all it takes is 3 to 4 minions for Token Druid to get that lethal blow.
Yeah. One thing that's weird playing against Token Druid, I think, is a downside of the deck. It's not a huge downside. Is by this stage, you usually know exactly what they have in hand, give or take a card. You can really plan for the exact thing your opponent's going to do. Can the Owl win the brawl?
No, it's the worst outcome for Monsanto right now. And now Muzzy, if he just goes Whispering Soul, Monsanto is forced to commit both cards in his hand to that play.
But he might be tempted to Giggling first with Power of the Wild and just try and stick one more silly board.
To be honest, it's a difficult decision because you want to Giggling afterwards, because I'd say it's... You want to go for the Soul and Whispering Woods first, because that forces your opponent to have 2 removals. They have to have Reckless Flurry and Brawl. If they don't have either of those, you win on the spot. If they do have both of those, then you go double Giggling Inventor, and they have virtually no answer to that besides a Mind Control tech. And if I remember correctly, Monsanto might be only playing 1 Mind Control tech.
And he used that a long time ago on that turn where he preserved his flurries.
There is only 1 Mind
to
Control.
clear up the first Soul of the Forest board. So he's out of techs.
I really wouldn't be surprised to see Muzzy just go ahead and make that play. You win, Lorinda.
You win this round, but I'll be back.
I think, honestly, either of these is fine.
It's almost identical. They both basically take 2 removals to clear.
I think the issue with this line of play, though, is let's say Monsanto does find that second Dynomatic, could go Dynomatic Hero Power, and then clear up with the Reckless Flurry. But I'm sure Muzzy accounted for that, saying that, he has Power of the Wild in his hand. He can always
bots.
just go...
I mean, 4 of those cards are bots.
Exactly.
So Dynomatic's not going to get everything done. Soul Launcher.
It's actually funny. If it did 2 damage, it'd be very useful here. Unfortunately for Monsanto, it does 1 damage.
Just details.
That's my favorite word, is the
Maybe if it was a gold card, you could give it +1 damage.
Ooh, I think that's a great way to evaluate gold cards, Linda. Why don't they have a special effect?
I don't know, because then Zola would be really good.
Zola would give you 2 copies.
Wow. Well, brawl number 2 is used, and probably the best outcome available too.
It definitely was. I think the only thing better was maybe that Scarab, but, this is fine. And Muzzy, now we see that Monsanto doesn't have that great of an answer for this next board state that Muzzy's going to make. And Muzzy's going to have a lot of power behind it. Monsanto just slightly shakes his head and understands what this means right now.
Yeah, Muzzy playing the Power of the Wild, which potential accident waiting to happen.
So the most that... Monsanto's even thinking about conceding. I mean, the most I think he can do is he can play out the 6-mana Rush. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. The 6-mana Rush in.
Spark Drill.
Spark Drill. He can play Spark Drill, rush in, then play the Spark, rush into the other minion, trade, and then Reckless Flurry.
Yeah, he has to now evaluate, okay, what if Muzzy doesn't have everything? Remember, he used a Savage Roar earlier. He used a Branching Paths as well, I think. Oh, no, he used a Branching Paths earlier.
I believe he's used 1 Savage Roar and 1 Branch.
So he hasn't got the usual million damage on this turn coming up. So from where Monsanto sit, one of those cards might not be present because there's still actually cards in Muzzy's deck. So I think that's what went through his mind when he went, concede, oh wait, no. Muzzy's actually used some stuff, that's why I'm only on 26 in the first place.
So if Muzzy only has access to 1 in a hypothetical world, you can clear off 3 of the minions, and then it will leave 4 treants afterwards, so you'll have no armor. If you have no armor, you're at 22 with 4 treants. If there's only one, the maximum damage that can be pushed would be, I believe, 18.
Okay.
But with this play, you know, it kind of changes it up a little bit. Monsanto would have been doing the math this turn to figure out which one was more effective for the situation. If there's only one. If there's 2, I believe he's dead no matter what.
Yeah, he's in a tough spot. Let's just maths it out.
And Muzzy, you know what? Might as well, even if it's not lethal at this point, which I'm pretty sure.
I think he might be too short, but again,
it's going to be close.
I didn't add it properly. Oh, he gets the 2 from his face, so yeah, he gets it dead on, I think.
I believe it is lethal. Even if it's not,
it's still won the game.
You still do this play because you're never going to have more treants on the board than you currently have.
Yeah, this goes back to earlier in the game. Yeah, it's well over. Where Muzzy just decided to get the damage in while he could with a 4 minion board.
Yes.
Otherwise, Monsanto would be on 1 million health by now. Yeah, 6/6 is 36, not 30. that's where I missed 6 damage.
That goes to show you, I mean, maybe there's more to this matchup than a lot of players think. A lot of players would just assume, you know, it's a warrior deck. It has Brawl, it has Reckless Flurry, sometimes it has Whirlwind. And a lot of times it can win that matchup, but if you play from the aggressive side, play it fairly well, you have a lot of game in that matchup.
And the way he got that game was by using the scavengers in particular to get himself a 3-7 and a 4-5 or whatever the numbers were. Just mediocre things, but they're going to chip away for 10 a turn if you don't kill them. And
I think Muzzy played that set so well that, you know, they said, you know what, we can't have you playing this well.
Yeah. We'll get the admin to play the next game for you, see what happens.
I think it was the sign was falling
But
off.
the scavengers the buff is allowing him to buff his minions to get himself this medium sort of board with sort of 4 attack, maybe 10 total attack. And the warrior doesn't have good spot removal. It has really bad, so boards of 3 minions are a real pain for you to deal with.
Yeah, that's one of the, you know, weaknesses of that warrior deck. I think they do cover up for it a little bit in the Super Collider aspect. Super Collider was a card that kind of gave them the opportunity to clear up those board states. However, still is an issue. If you don't have the Super Collider up, you can't deal with those board states, and especially Death Rattle minions. Death Rattle minions have notoriously been bad for warrior. They really can't deal with those unless they have some kind of silence effect. But Muzzy taking that game, I think, is important for the series. I think if Muzzy lost that, he would still have a great counter queue in this Death Rattle Hunter. But since he's now taken that game, Monsanto's next queue is going to have to be the Warlock, which I think is a pretty decent matchup.
Okay.
But then Muzzy can slide his Rogue through. And that's very important right now for Muzzy to slide through, is that Rogue. Especially since Monsanto has 2 good decks to it.
Yeah, and against the Even Lock, that should be okay. It's an interesting matchup, but actually, Even Lock, is anything interesting when Even Lock's involved? Let's say
I
yes.
love Even Lock.
Do you?
I know you're not a huge fan of Even Lock, Lorinda, but let me learn you something.
Yeah, you can
today.
enlighten me today over the course of the next 3 days as to why Even Lock is interesting.
I think Even Warlock is one of the most skill-testing decks in the meta. And the reason I say that is because although it is very linear with its game plan, it wants to play a large minion and it wants to connect that damage. Even Lock has those turns that aggressive decks have in the early stages of the game, where if you make one wrong decision, you lose the series. You lose that game. For instance, it's what you mulligan for. It's how you course out your damage. It's where you use your removal and where you don't use your removal. And I think that's why you see a lot of players like Amnesiac and Muzzy bringing it to these large-scale tournaments, because they understand just how powerful being proactive is while also having a, you know, control-ish kind of game plan. And that's something that even Warlock gives to the players.
I must admit, I've seen so many games won with plays I didn't expect, joking aside, where a Paladin's about to kill you and you can Hellfire away, but you just play a Mountain Giant before the Hellfire, eat up a load of damage, and then start smashing your opponents for 8 per turn for the next 3 turns, and suddenly you've won the game before they can re-establish. That involves a lot of good understanding of how tempo works and how much time either side has. And again, even decisions like this, how big do I want things to be on turn 3? Do I want to get the board? Do I care? Well, you don't care, because Druid only does one thing ever on turn 2, and it's this.
Yeah, and Muzzy, fortunately for him, he needed that card right now, because this hand is extremely awkward. If a Giant were to come down, Muzzy really couldn't do anything about it, but potentially hope to coin out a Giggling Inventor just to try and stop it.
I was just about to say before, like, Hearthstone ruined my line of conversation that the main reason this deck is favoured against the Druid is Defile.
Yes, Defile is a card, Hellfire is a card, just putting big taunts in the way is a card.
But this game might not go that way. This game might just go with hit you, hit you, hit you, lol.
This game might go with play a giant, hit you in the face, clear your board so the giant can then again hit you in the face, and
play some drakes and
play
hit
some
you in
drakes.
the face.
You know what those drakes do, Lorinda?
Hit you in the face?
They hit you in the face. Right now, Muzzy's not working with anything, and it's going to be very unfortunate. With the Giggling Inventor, it is a powerful stop to that giant because the Giggling Inventor is one of the notoriously the most annoying cards for a mountain giant.
I mean, it makes annoyatrons. It's very well designed flavor-wise. Why does it giggle at you? Why? Why do we have these dreams of this thing?
It's a very cruel card, Lorinda.
Oh, I'm pretty sure this is Chucky's first invention of a card.
I could definitely see that. Chucky said, "What is the most annoying card we could put in Hearthstone?"
I'm only get to make one card because I'm kind of new. but please, can we have this one?
And he's just maniacally giggling while he makes it.
Yeah.
It's originally just supposed to be Inventor.
Yeah, it's named after Chucky. This is how he sounds when he invents the card.
I do like, however, the play that Muzzy goes for here with the ramp over, playing the Giggling Inventor. Just because Muzzy wants to get down this Malfurion as quickly as possible, because Malfurion is one of the most important cards in this matchup. I almost wouldn't be surprised to even see him go for Poisonous Spiders, because if Muzzy decides to go for Poisonous Spiders, he can answer the Vulgar Homunculus and the Giant that comes down, or you force Monsanto to use a Hellfire.
Yeah, a good spell, yeah, exactly.
Which is not something that Monsanto wants to even use, and then the Giggling Inventor just hits the board, and there's no Hellfire to try and clean that up and help out.
I think we've heard Muzzy say before that you should always make the Poisonous Spiders with Malfurion, even when it's wrong. Like,
I can believe that.
You should man up when it's wrong and do it anyway, because it's usually right. I have also seen him make the 1/5s on occasion, to be fair. But he definitely said that thing.
And the crazy thing is Monsanto even recognizes that by playing the Twilight Drake first, accepting that he would rather have the Twilight Drake die to a Poisonous Spider than having this Mountain Giant, which he thinks is going to be his win condition through this game. I mean, that was a great turnaround from Monsanto. You can just see the level of counterplay that these two players are thinking about right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts when you watch two top guys doing weird things. It takes a while to process sometimes. Oh, he didn't play the Giant. What an idiot. Oh no, he's really good.
You're not wrong, Lorinda. And I think with that Hellfire pickup, Monsanto's a little frustrated that he didn't play the Giant because he'd be able to Hellfire and push that 8 damage turn by turn. But that's not something you can predict. You can't say, oh, I'm going to draw this Hellfire next turn. Let me play the Giant anyways, so that way when he has the Poisonous Spiders, it just dies. You can't kind of read with that foresight because you have to make the play to your current hand.
Yeah, and he has to also realize that he doesn't, and he has realized that you don't need to win this game that quickly. You need to win it at some point before they run you out of Defiles and Hellfires, but you've got a lot of time, especially with the Dread Infernal thrown into the mix.
Yeah, Dread Infernal is very powerful in this matchup too. Not only does it come back from Gul'dan, but just that hero power in and of itself gets the work done.
But one way to stop that second reload is just to kill your opponent until they are dead from it.
Yeah, Monsanto's going to be putting on as much pressure as possible before this Ultimate Infestation comes down. Because right now, Monsanto does not have much life to work with, and Muzzy is pushing his agenda, and that is face.
Yeah, and I mean, just look, there's lethal board damage for Muzzy next turn. Well, not board damage, damage with hands. Savage Draw, Swipe, plenty of damage. I mean, Savage Draw, Swipe alone with no minions is what? 9? Hero power?
9 damage. That's and then he can Ultimate Infestation on the following turn.
Yeah,
that
so
would be lethal.
Yeah, we're joking around, but there's no healing in hand at the moment. There is a Beetle, there is a Gul'dan, but he has 6 mana. It's easy to forget that when you're playing it's a Druid. You sometimes don't have as much mana as you think you do.
To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to see Monsanto go for this and then taunt up, trying to play around it as much as possible. Because he recognizes that he needs to stop taking damage here. Even if he goes for a Defile play, clears up the board, and then plays a Twilight Drake afterwards as a 4/9, Muzzy is going to hero power face over and over.
I mean, that was just an extra 15 health by taunting those up. That's a way of healing, and again with double Sun Fury in the deck, it's fairly standard. But some people have started cutting one sometimes. I think we'll see two a lot at this event because there's a lot of aggro. But
I think with the players, when they built their even Warlock list, they decided to try and maximize their chances against an aggressive deck, because if you're playing even Warlock and you're banning Quest Rogue, you are leaving up the aggressive decks. So you want to make sure you have, something to secure that matchup.
it is the thing I find most interesting, particularly about Last Hero Standing, but tournaments in general. The ways you have to change the decks, not the decks you bring. I think people concentrate too much on that, but the tweaks you make within the decks you bring. The archetypes choose themselves sometimes, but then you have to say, like you've just said, well, I'm leaving a aggro, I need to play 2 Sun Furies 100%, and Beetles, just in case.
You see Muzzy here just going to go ahead and play out as many cards as possible, not only to clean up room for the Ultimate Infestation, but again, another matchup where Muzzy most likely feels as if the board state basically never gets this wide. Might as well capitalize on it now. He did push one. He pushed one less damage than typical because he used his face to clean up the Drake. But that was in hopes of Monsanto, not being intimidated by this board state, leaving it up, and then the Giggling Inventor can push damage again, effectively netting him more damage than if he had put the Giggling Inventor in and pushed that 1 extra damage.
I'm intimidated by this board state, looking at it.
I'd be scared.
Muzzy's getting work done here with little resources again.
It's even little crazy things like that I just ponder over and I think about. Muzzy didn't push that 1 extra damage because a lot of the times it doesn't matter. If you Ultimate Infestation, you put your opponent to 4 currently, and the range for that is the swipe. The only thing it changes is the hero power, but Monsanto is going to most likely play around that with something. So that range doesn't typically matter if you're trying to shoot over a taunt minion with, say, the swipe that you hopefully draw off of the Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah, it's just the right number. I've seen more and more players pushing more damage in weird situations than ever before. The number of people is sneaking 2 damage through to face when they get the chance, especially in unfavourables, is going up. But also players playing more and more correctly around key numbers like that.
It's a very interesting decision point from Muzzy here. Definitely think he wants to try and get this Ultimate Infestation down. The question is, what does it go on to? Does it go on to the Mountain Giant? Does it go on to face? I want to say it potentially goes onto the Mountain Giant, because you've seen Monsanto make these very weak plays of just desperately putting taunt minions out there. And if you can clean up this Giant, it's kind of one of the last taunt minions that you hope is in Monsanto's hand. That way you can eventually push the damage through.
He's got to work out if he thinks he ever wins if he UIs the Giant, because he's definitely taking 10 next turn. That'll put him down to 14.
That is true.
Like, he'll want to do that. That makes the most sense. But he may feel he has to UI face as an only chance to win.
He also has to kind of race the clock before Gul'dan comes down.
Yep.
Because we do talk about how, you can make these board states, but if Gul'dan hits the board and he keeps hero powering over and over, it's not like the Warrior one, where, you're gaining armor and you're trying to outlive.
Yeah, you are just putting them on that clock.
You're not only putting them on that clock, you're also dealing with their board states.
And Muzzy recognizing, I think, that wasn't going to get there. All the UI options just looked grim, so he is going for this. All right. Kill this lot option.
I think Muzzy recognizes with taking this play that if he has to use say a second Hellfire here or some kind of Defile, what'll ultimately happen is then he can Ultimate Infestation the Giant, have a 5/5 clear on the board, and can push the damage through that way.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense, much more nice of a play. That's really bad wording, but whatever words I tried to use,
I like that
just
wording.
insert your own word here.
See, sometimes, it's underappreciated, this more simplistic
Build your own
phrases.
cast.
Build your own cast. That sounds like a very, very horrible Hearthstone card.
Just sounds like a really cheap YouTube video where you just patch together everybody's bad comments over the years. Toad's probably working on it right now.
I'd hope so. I'm waiting for it to come out. I'm actually very curious if, instead of using the Ultimate Infestation, Muzzy goes for some very weird spreading plague turn. I don't think you can do it. I think Ultimate Infestation has to be the play here. Now that I'm looking at it,
Yeah.
I wanted to get really cute with that spreading plague, but I think you're getting a little too cute then.
UI just doesn't do enough, does it? It should do 5 to all minions and face.
It might as well. I mean,
Why give them decisions, man? Just make it kill everything.
yeah, the Ultimate Infestation was really good here. Going to be allowing Muzzy to pick up a bunch of resources. There's Swipe, Savageor, and a Hero Power. Right now, Monsanto has no great way of dealing with this. He could life tap into some healing, but he needs to live one more turn to Gul'dan. If he plays out the Vulgar Homunculus, Muzzy has lethal. If he doesn't play it, Muzzy has lethal.
That sounds like an awkward position to be in. And if Muzzy can take down 2 games with his Token Druid deck,
It's not looking good for Monsanto. Monsanto's best Q would be his
only Q, because that's how Last Hero
exactly,
works.
be his own Token Druid deck. And then at that point, it's a 50-50 matchup, and then maybe Monsanto feels less comfortable on it than Muzzy,
Yeah.
because this is Muzzy's tried and true deck. This is not Monsanto's tried and true deck.
When you were playing, did you factor that into your lineups much? If you had decks you were really comfortable with, did you try and prefer them if you could?
I was one of those players that felt as if I was well-rounded enough to commit to anything, but I think that should be an important factor for a lot of these players, because it doesn't make sense to bring something you've never played before.
Yeah.
I know a lot of these players say, oh, I brought this and I never played before, but
Their
at the end of the
definition of
day,
never played is a bit different to people watching at home's definition of never played as well.
Exactly. They will be familiar and comfortable with the deck. They may not be as proficient or a master of the deck, but they will definitely understand it enough that they can get the wins in. But it will be these matchups where you're playing against someone who is very proficient with the deck that you'll struggle.
Yeah, you will just lose those nuances. And we must mention that he's not actually dead yet.
Yeah, with that life tap into the Lich King, that changed up a whole lot. Muzzy would have to either dedicate all of his mana to clearing up this Lich King, which I don't think he wants to do. I think he just wants to go as wide as possible to set up for this Gul'dan, because he knows Gul'dan is around the horizon. And if it wasn't for that Lich King, Monsanto would be dead here, and we'd be moving on to game 3.
But he's also saying, okay, you can't Gul'dan. I'm going to stop you from Gul'daning by making this wide board.
He has to at this point.
And the second Muzzy doesn't kill Monsanto, Monsanto is going to kill Muzzy. Muzzy himself can't take too many hits from Lich Kings and Giants. Those things hurt.
Yeah, Monsanto is actually kind of close to lethal. I believe he's 4 off at this moment. Just kind of crazy to think about, right? If he
really
goes
is.
Death and Decay, Hellfire, and pushes the damage. But I ultimately think it has to be Gul'dan here. It's a hard question. Monsanto's going to have to ask himself, you know, what is the reach on Muzzy's end? Does he have Savageor? Does he have Swipe? Does he have Branching Paths? These are all important questions.
I think he can realize he's in trouble because of the use of the flute there. Why else would you use a flute for a, not measly, but just for a Tyrant if you didn't have it next turn?
There's also the play of just playing out one of the Beetles, Hellfiring, Death and Decay, pushing that damage.
Where he's at. It was the first instinct view, and then it's like, oh, that doesn't look that great, but yeah.
I mean, the reason he went for this is because he knows Muzzy cannot attack into this Lich King to push some lethal damage through.
So how does Muzzy get out of this now? Monsanto seems to have found a way around.
That's lethal, right? You swipe, Hero Power, Savageor, and you use the Spellstone to clear up the minion. That's exactly lethal.
It is exactly lethal. Nicely spotted.
There's multiple ways to do this. You can do it this way, gain the armor and do the 4 damage. You could have swiped the minion, done the 2, gain the hero power attack. But Muzzy's going to clutch this out in an unfavorable matchup, and now he's 2-0, Lorinda.
That is nuts. Looked like he'd got it done. Then looked like Monsanto had saved it with the tap, knowing that he was going to get swiped, so what's the point in not tapping? Didn't like his options available. Then looking like he'd got it done, and then the Lich King just falls to the removal spell, one of the very few removal spells for the Druid. And Muzzy 2-0, looking like it was always in the bag to him. Just another day in Muzzville.
Yeah, just another day in the Muzz Nation. as some people would like to call it. I don't know what you call it, but
Whatever it is, it's an interesting and terrifying place.
I'm a part of it. It's actually nicer than it seems.
You like a lot of these weird theme parks. Gara Land.
Is Muzzy Land just a theme park now? Is
I think so.
Muzzy World?
Yeah.
Muzzy, when he's on his game and he's just in the pristine, just playing ability, he is in a world, in a league of his own.
I'm from EU, remember this. We have Hunter Ace. Yeah. It might be a two-person league.
All right, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. The two Titans. We've got Muzzy. You can, I guess, have Hunter Ace.
Oh, we're keeping him. Don't worry about that. And there's also, I think Saiyan's unfortunate to get left out of these conversations too.
Oh, Saiyan is such a powerful player.
If he goes 7 wins at this tournament, he'll overtake Tars for most DreamHack wins ever. And Tars has been top of that list as long as I've been casting DreamHack.
Because Tars goes to a lot of those DreamHacks.
He really does. And Saiyan doesn't go to a lot of them. He's not, that I know of. He wasn't on the list a couple of days ago at least. And so, yeah, he could be the #1 ranked player too.
And now, Lorinda, everyone's favorite matchup. I've had the pleasure of casting this a couple times. The Token Druid Mirror.
Right, let's just dig in. This is weird because it can sometimes go really quickly, and with this new build,
Yes.
I suspect it's a bit quicker.
It is much different because you get punished more heavily for playing into something like Spreading Plague. For instance, in the past, you could go for a turn where you go Whispering Woods, you force them to play Spreading Plague, and then you trade off your Whispering Woods, and then you respond with Spreading Plague Soul. This matchup is very unique. It's not. I still to this day have not quite mastered this matchup. I don't think anybody has. Maybe someone like Muzzy might have.
The original thoughts with the old version were just go to Fatigue and don't ever play into Spreading Plague. But as you can see here, I don't think it will. Because Muzzy's going to be encouraged to ramp into Malfurion and use that advantage, any Hearthstone advantage you can get, to force your opponent to do things.
Yeah, with this matchup, it's very important to make those mid-range size board states. That way, Monsanto feels pressured to clear it up somehow, but he can't Spreading Plague it because it's very counterintuitive to a mid-range board state. Spreading Plague you only want to do when it's very wide. So you see Muzzy here going for the Serenite Chain Gang, not only because it's basically his only play this turn, but because he probably wants to set up the Strong Shell Scavenger in order to make that mid-range board state. Typically in the past, it would be something like a Violet Teacher and an Arcane Tyrant, or 2 Violet Teachers where you don't play spells.
Yeah.
But with this list, it's a whole lot more important with the Serenite Chain Gangs to make those mid-range board states.
And something else I've learned about this matchup, is if you make a mistake, you lose the next turn, or you lose because of it immediately.
Yes.
It might take 3 turns to actually see that you're dead, but it instantly costs you the game. So if you just sort of mentally turn off and go, this is a fatigue version of this match, you just lose if your opponent suddenly can contrive a way to find the damage. And so exact counting, unfortunately for casters, is really important in this game.
This is definitely one of those matchups that just is very draining for players. They have to grind this matchup. It's kind of like a Odd Warrior Mirror, where you kind of have to evaluate each and every turn. It's not like a lot of the control versus aggressive matchups where aggro plays their proactive play, control decides to deal with it, and then you keep going back and forth until someone folds.
Yep.
With this matchup, you have to think, am I even allowed to play this card here, or will I lose because I played this one card on turn 7?
Yeah, 20 turns later.
20 turns later, I decided to play the coin, and I lost the matchup. It's crazy things like that, where each player is going to be taking the entirety of their turn. You even see Muzzy there go for the coin onto the hero power just to clean it up that way.
And the weirdness,
answer as much.
The weirdness, he's willing to buff his minions, but still trade them into the 1/1s because of the threat these 1/1s represent. It's just bizarre that you'd buff your cards and then not. Because this gets them out of the way, as you said, a Savage Roar.
Best card in Hearthstone is a card going face. A wise man once said.
But you're a Shutterwalk fan. Shutterwalks don't go face.
Shutterwalk goes face. Shutterwalk goes face infinitely.
What?
That's my favorite card.
Okay. You got me. 1 each. You win this one.
I don't think Monsanto quite wanted to use the swipe there, but he was kind of forced to.
I mean, he didn't want to use the Whispering Woods in the first place. to even set up that situation. He's already a little bit behind because of all that.
The one important thing that Swipe can do later on in the game is if you make a Whispering Woods board state and your opponent is forced to Spreading Plague it, the one way you deal with it is by using the swipe to swipe the face. Then all of the scarabs go down to 4 health, and then you have a buff board that you can then Savage Ore in order to take value trades into all of them. So using Swipe in that manner really helps you win this matchup. But if you have to commit it on early board states, you don't have the swipes in order to necessarily deal with a Spreading Plague as effectively. You may have to use 2 Savage Roars or 2 Branching Paths, and if you're doing that, that's when it gets a little sketchy.
And this is going to get very interesting now because Muzzy's almost certainly going to drop Malfurion. It's one of the best cards in this game.
You saw him keep it in the mulligan. He kept it for a reason.
But Monsanto has since drawn that Spreading Plague.
But Spreading Plague only 5 minions.
But are you ever going to get
minions, more? But to be honest, you might. I don't know. It's a tough call.
The weird thing is when you've used it, then your opponent can just ignore it for the rest of the game.
Exactly. And you even see Muzzy is a poisonous spider gamer. He just really appreciates the poisonous tag on the minion.
Yeah, the poisonous spider ride at Muzzyville is definitely worth a go. Very scary.
Very
ride.
nauseating.
Yeah.
Kind of takes you out with 1 hit.
Yeah, you don't go on it twice the same day.
No, you don't.
The bracelet gets taken off. You're done. Go home.
The Muzzy Spider Rider. What kind of theme park are we at? Muzzyland sounds like a very nice place. I've visited before, of course.
You imagine Muzzy lives there. Then you work out just what goes on.
I don't want to know what goes on. You see Monsanto there. The reason you don't want to... obviously, playing Spreading Plague into this is very poor because it is the poisonous spiders. But even if it were the taunt minions, you would play the Spreading Plague and you wouldn't have anything else to play with it. I feel like when you play Spreading Plague, you have to guarantee it gets buffed by something.
Yep.
If you play Spreading Plague just to live, you are losing this game.
Whoa.
Monsanto's already ready. He's thinking...
Oh, is he just... He's dead to some things.
He's
dead
probably
to, like,
dead to double
Ore.
Savage Ore, Branching Path Savage Ore. Or he's just so behind at that point that he's just hovering. And I mean, Monsanto...
Yeah, double Savage Ore I think is exact lethal. I might be
so
wrong.
as well.
I've been known to be wrong.
We're all wrong at some point. We're all human, Lorinda.
Oh, that's nice. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me.
Nice.
Darren thinks I'm a robot for
I've
some
never
reason.
been wrong.
Oh, definitely not. DreamHack winners
I'm never
are
wrong.
never wrong. That's why they're DreamHack winners.
You see Monsanto there just kind of, you know, disappointed. But Muzzy, he has to go for this. I don't think you're ever going to get more damage through with this. And I believe it might even set up Swipe to be a potential lethal. And if it does, then it makes even more sense, you know, just get that Swipe into something. It doesn't set up Swipe to be quite lethal.
Well, Swipe hero power would be, so now Monsanto's got to do something just to stay alive. And like you say, if you're doing things to stay alive, you're never winning the game.
That's, you know, sometimes the worst. At least with the inclusion of this flute, he can make this play and then potentially do the exact same play on the following turn.
Yeah, and trying to stop Muzzy from having the counterplay himself. Now Muzzy's got to worry. Oh, don't worry.
Trying to evaluate whether Swipe was lethal through this board state. You can swipe one of the scarabs. You can then put 2 spiders in. You can put the 3/3 strong shell into one of the scarabs. The issue is the 5/5 Arcane Tyrant will not be able to clear up one of them. So Muzzy just going to have to draw cards here to try and find something.
Floop something. You mentioned earlier how good the Floop is in this deck, and we are seeing it now.
There is the potential for Muzzy to just kind of go wide, play out the soul of the forest, try and make sure he has some kind of board state. Because although Monsanto did make a powerful board state, Muzzy still has that reload.
But he does need to be careful. You can lose this in a hurry. With 10 mana, your opponent can do so much damage.
Yes.
So Muzzy needs to be awake at all times. That's what we're saying about this match. If you don't kill your opponent, they can definitely do what... They've got the same deck as you. They can do the same stuff back that you just did.
Still 2 minions left on the board. Could get some value trades. Those Arcane Tyrants are going to be so obnoxious to answer for Monsanto on the other end, though. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he just trades off the Strong Shell into the other Arcane Tyrant, gives the other 2/2, then Spreading Plague, Strong Shell, and push it face.
That seems good to me. And then see if Muzzy can deal with it.
Maybe take a value trade on one of the 2/2s.
Sure, make sure they can't. Thing is, when you're on 6, you're kind of all in every turn. So
there is some merit for playing out the Soul of the Forest. That is something that Monsanto is going to be considering, whether he wants to play the Strong Shell or the Soul of the Forest. But I kind of like, you know, just trading it off and playing out the Strong Shell, because then on the following turn, most likely your board state doesn't die, because it would require Muzzy to have a Branching Path or a Savage Roar, which would have meant that, you know, he would have already been dead at this point.
And he's got his own Branching Path. This is going to be a lot of damage coming back the other way here for Monsanto. Maybe we've written him off a bit soon in this series.
I know, we were, and Monsanto was even writing himself off this series.
Yeah, it's his fault.
Button.
I'm not to blame.
I like face here, but I don't blame him for taking that trade just in case. See, because there's the Branching Path.
Because bad things can happen. So all Muzzy needs to do now, and it's a big all, but if he can weather this storm, he's seen both Spreading Plagues, and then he can go about his business however he likes for the rest of the game. So even though your opponent's on 6, basically you're all hands on deck, not dying for a turn or 2, and then just rely on your Spreading Plague surviving, and the fact that Monsanto is running out. He must be running out of resources. We've seen him use swipes. We've seen him use so much just to stay alive. But it's a big if. Muzzy is going to Plague up.
I wouldn't be surprised if he also commits a swipe onto one of the minions. That's a difficult call to make, though. It could just be that he decides the Branching Paths for attack.
The thing with the Branching Paths, which is definitely tempting, is that 7 is an annoying health total for your opponent's minions. I guess Branching Paths force them to double trade and then swipe next turn might be a thing you can do.
That is something you can do. I mean, there's even the potential for picking up, say, an Ultimate Infestation and trying to end the game that way over the top. That's going to be quite difficult to do, especially because Monsanto is going to have just a great response with his own Branching Paths here in order to clean up everything with value trades. To be honest, after Muzzy sees this, I would not be surprised if he just concedes on the spot. There's
a lot.
Very small ways that Muzzy gets back into this game. Besides he needs the second Spreading Plague.
He needed those 3/7s to have to double trade in there and take a lot of damage. That was his way in. And then he could trade back and get the swipe in and clear up, but the second buff is just going to finish this.
Yeah, I think the second out for Muzzy right here that he's still playing towards, because a lot of players, you know, this is very daunting. His second out right now is swiping the face, hoping Monsanto does not have any kind of armor gain or buff.
Does he have both swipes available?
No, but he has Ultimate Infestation.
Okay.
I think that's the out Muzzy's going to be playing for here, is to nourish for draw, swipe the face, hope he's not dead, but I think he might just be dead on board, to be honest. That is a lot of damage. It's 30 damage on board, so he would need to heal as well, which is not possible right now.
You can trade some of them away, though, and turn them into 2/2s.
Could do that. I think he's going to need to draw
good cards.
Something off of this. It needs to either be the Ultimate Infestation or the swipe in order to play to that out. Doesn't pick up either. I don't think there's anything off the Nourish. I think Monsanto just clutched this one back.
25, he can go to 28 if he armors up. Muzzy's going to Nourish and see what he can find.
But the issue is...
I don't think there is anything. Well, maybe he gets both? Nah.
I think if he can go to 28 and play the swipe, that was the out. I think that was the out to try and push that damage. We can see there that there's many different ways that Monsanto can possibly end the game. There's Savage Roar, there's Branching Paths, there's Ultimate Infestation. But sometimes you got to play those outs, and if Muzzy had, you know, gone for the swipe on face and his hand was ultimately dead, there was a possibility Muzzy could have won this game with that Ultimate Infestation.
He's still alive.
He's still alive right now.
Yeah. He's found a way to stay alive.
Plus the Ultimate Infestation is 26. He's alive by 2.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's a good life, but he's still alive.
I believe with the swipe play, he would have been dead either way, so he had to go for
Yeah,
this
he had
play.
to do this.
He's still kicking.
This has been a crazy series for both players finding ways to generate a chance to win. Would expect nothing less, of course. Savage Roar, just in case he needs to do more than 2 damage next turn. Thought it was exciting then, I remembered he's on 2. It's like, okay. Kill the minion.
No, I definitely think you push this face. The minion's not going to do anything to you. I don't think it ever gets through.
Look at it, it's growling. It's a growling tree.
Actually, you know what? You can clear the minion. It's a very difficult call because if you set this up and Muzzy hero powers for armor and then has some crazy play where he lives, then you can ultimate infestation the following turn to kill him. Whereas if you take the trade, there's not to do that. And Muzzy just going to go ahead and give that one up. And, you know, this is another one of those matchups where, you know, Monsanto may be down 2-0, but Monsanto's last deck is looking fairly good into Muzzy's lineup.
Yeah, Death Rattle Hunter doesn't enjoy being hit at all by this deck. I've seen ball control in HGG, just won it on turn 5. Just, here's my wisps. What are you going to do? Oh, you're not going to do anything? Okay, I'm going to coin double Savage Draw. Goodbye.
Not only that, but also the Odd Rogue. Odd Rogue sometimes just kind of folds over to Token Druid if they have something like the Spellstone to upgrade it to kill off a Hench Clan Thug or a Vicious Fledgling, and then you just, again, you make those
Just
1/1s,
play wisps, yeah.
and they can't really deal with that unless they're running Phantom Knives, but the majority of Odd Rogue lists do not run Phantom Knives. One thing going for Muzzy in his Odd Rogue list is he is playing 2 copies of Tar Creeper. And Tar Creeper is notoriously good against aggressive decks.
We've seen a lot of Tar Creepers today. I think Purple brought Tar Creepers in every single deck.
I think that's something that a lot of these players noticed, is that they don't necessarily have the greatest answers for, say, aggressive decks, or they just want to guarantee that their rogue has a better chance against something like...
Or the Mirror, even.
The Mirror, exactly. And you see there Muzzy hovering over Fungal Mancer and Hench Clan Thug. And I love this mulligan from Muzzy. It doesn't seem like the craziest mulligan, but Muzzy recognizes that he's not going to win this matchup by going toe-to-toe with the Druid. He wants to maybe play a 1-drop, hero power, play out one of the 3 drops, and then, bam, slam a Fungal Mancer. And if he slams a Fungal Mancer onto a board state, that could be game-ending in and of itself, because that's going to be very difficult for Druid to answer.
Yeah, it's going to... I'm just looking at his hand as I was about to say something far less important. Muzzy's hand is good. Right, moving on. You have a window where you can try and kill the rogue around turn 5 or 6, and you don't have to do that by having 1/2s on the board. You have to do it by having these mid-range things that Muzzy has a whole hand of. And if your Fungal Mancer buffs before the Spreading Plague is played, that's a lot of extra damage.
Yeah, and you saw as soon as that coin came out, that is
clutch.
That is the most important draw in Monsanto's deck right now. You actually saw Monsanto, as soon as Muzzy went for that coin, kind of lean back in his chair, go, oh no, it's a Fledgling.
No way of dealing with that without that Spellstone for at least 1 turn, by which time the Fledgling has fledged and is off and turned into a fully ranged Pterodax that is just killing you.
That Fledgling is vicious. And pink.
Yeah, one up, one down.
I like pink birds.
Still no ramp for Monsanto. Not always the worst case if you don't get ramp in this deck, but when you've got nothing else, he's going to have to draw a card with the branching paths, which you do surprisingly often in this deck.
It's not the most, you know, it's not the best play, but sometimes you just have to do it in order to find answers to threats that you typically didn't have. Malfurion is a very important draw. It won't come into play for a couple of turns, but Malfurion is one of the ways you kind of take control of this matchup.
Right.
You use that hero power in order to leverage board states while also, you know, just gaining life and putting pressure on the board that Rogue typically can't answer.
Yeah, with the 2 Spreading Plagues and the Malfurion, he should have time to start to get established now. And of course, he liked the draw. He goes for the armor, but that's an alert to Muzzy that something is going on. He was digging, and then he's not digging anymore. But Muzzy doesn't care.
I don't think Muzzy cares either. I think there's a couple things that could alert to, is that he either picked up, say, a Nourish, so he doesn't need to draw more. There's also the fact that he feels as if his hand, he has follow-up for the next couple turns, and he just would rather gain the armor. So Muzzy's going to expect that Monsanto has some kind of follow-up to this. We see that it's not the greatest follow-up. It's more so trying to live to Spreading Plague.
Yeah, and Whispering Wood's not really where he wants to be because it kills off his Spreading Plagues to some extent. But he has no other play. If he does this, he's kind of relying that Muzzy takes notice. Muzzy might not take that much notice of this.
I mean,
he's got to pay it some attention, but he might just put a lot of damage into your face.
I mean, honestly,
especially now.
There's two potential plays here. There's the Fungal Mancer because it's the most mana efficient, or there's the Tar Creeper hero power. I think that's also another very strong line of play. And with the Tar Creeper hero power, what you do is you clear up 2 of the minions, you force a Savage Roar or Branching Paths into the Tar Creeper twice, and then they can't answer the 2 Hench Clan bugs. And I really like this recognition from Muzzy.
So the Mole will trade and the others will go face, right? Then there's only 4 to deal with the Tar Creeper.
I think so. Muzzy's going to be evaluating whether he wants to take these trades. He may take 1. Maybe that makes it, you know, a little bit better. You know, Muzzy just going full safe there, because if there is something like...
Yeah, bad things can happen if you leave
bad things
those
can happen
risks,
if you leave
for
those
sure.
up. And I think Muzzy says, you know, he's in the driver's seat right now. As long as he makes sure that this board sticks and there's not something he's forgetting about, like a double Savage Roar play, he can ultimately win this game.
Yeah, I mean, these things aren't getting smaller anytime soon, so straight through a Spreading Plague if it comes down. He feels that I'm dealing with the things that beat me. Oh, I don't mind.
Yeah, not only that, but then you can just Fungal Mancer up the Dire Mole and the Tar Creeper, and that'll answer, yet again, another one of those Spreading Plague tokens.
One thing that's great about being somebody who's played a deck a lot of times, like a lot of times, and being an expert in it, is when you play against it. It's so beautiful. You know everything that's going on. You know, all the possible hands. You're like, oh, he didn't play Wild Growth, but he did stop with the 1 Malfurion card. Okay, he's got 1 good card. And you just get such a feel, such an instinctive feel for what's going on.
Mushroom power!
Here comes down that Fungal Mancer. Muzzy kept it in his hand for a reason. Monsanto's best response is either going to be Malfurion to try and answer the board, or Spreading Plague, double Arcane Tyrant at this point. Almost wouldn't be surprised to see Spreading Plague, double Arcane Tyrant. If you go for that, you can clean out the majority of the board afterwards.
Yeah, he'll be concerned at his lack of backup.
Yes.
But it does feel good.
There's also another very interesting line of play where you can play the Spreading Plague and you don't buff it by anything, or you go for the Malfurion because it's effectively like the same as Spreading Plague.
Yeah.
And after you do that, you force Muzzy to answer the board state. You're not going to die. They have to play more minions or they're going to lose the game. Then once you do that, you play the Spreading Plague plus 1 to 2 Arcane Tyrants and a Strong Shell and win the game through that.
That looks like the route he's going to go.
And see, look, you see him not even hero powering down that Fungal Mancer because he would rather it be on the board.
Yeah.
That way, Spreading Plague becomes better. No reason to clear it off if you're just going to Spreading, if you want it for that extra Scarab token from Spreading Plague.
I mean, not that Muzzy would have done it anyway because he knows that Spreading Plague can be there, but now he 100% won't play Giggling Inventor because he'll be aware as to why that has been left up.
The question is, does he really play anything? Does he just kind of ride with this board state and say, this is enough?
Yeah, I know you've got Spreading Plague, so I'm just going to sit here and do this. Fledgling is tempting, but no, I'm just not going to fall for your little shenanigans.
I definitely like it, and that's what separates, you know, Muzzy from a lot of these Hearthstone players out on the floor, is that he is so proficient at what he does, and he is a very strong player.
It's also what separates players playing in a tournament from players in the middle of the month streaming their ladder play.
Yes.
In the middle of the month, you just sort of play your minions, you don't pay that much attention to what your opponent's doing, move on. In a tournament, all you do is look at the Hearthstone game and forget everything else that's going on.
Yeah, when you're in that chair, you are in a different world. You are in Muzzy land.
Muzzy land has been a pretty happy place to be, but might not be in this round if Monsanto can do this reverse sweep. Going for the play you were talking about, just setting up so much shenanigans.
I love
here.
this. It's going to be very difficult for Muzzy to get through this.
Of course, Monsanto does have no follow-up if Muzzy does get through this, and with Cold Bloods and Giggling Inventors and SI7 agents and Vile Spines all at his disposal. Muzzy has plenty of options as to how to defend against this to at least some degree.
I mean, if you're Muzzy here, I think really one of the only potential plays here is to play Vicious Fledgling, go ahead and Vile Spine one of the minions, kill off the other two, and then hope Monsanto doesn't have any kind of burst damage, and hope your board stays good enough to get there, and Monsanto cannot draw cards like Ultimate Infestation or Savage Roar or Branching Paths, because the game would effectively be over at that point.
Yeah, just looking at options where the Cold Blood and the reload of your dagger do anything, but I don't think they're good enough.
No, because you would want that Cold Blood to do
as a finishing
more.
thing.
You could potentially push an extra 2 damage face if you were to do that.
Oh, now he's going to use a Cold Blood for 4, though. Maybe clear something with it and hide behind the Giggler.
It looks like, you know, Muzzy has a plan of his own, just saying, you know what? I'm going to make a huge Blood Knight, try and contest the board as much as possible.
And next turn he has 9 mana. He can play one of the 3 drops. He can Cold Blood properly. He can kill the remaining taunt with the Vile Spine, assuming there is only 1 taunt, which we can see there won't be. And that is a lot of potential damage next turn.
I wouldn't be surprised if Muzzy did this trying to set up some kind of unique, cute, lethal through the following turn.
Yeah.
Muzzy really, you know, in these game states, that's one of the most important things to look for, is to look, how do I set up lethal on the next couple of turns? Because I cannot give my opponent time. Muzzy cannot give Monsanto time, because he gives him time, that's the second Spreading Plague. That's the Ultimate Infestation. If he says, hey, I can make this play, it may be worse onto the board now, but it could potentially set up lethal, that's something he's going to be looking for.
And to be fair, rule 101 of playing against Druid is they can't deal with big things. The very first thing you teach people about playing against Druid is they can't deal with your Edwin.
I think Muzzy's just going to go ahead and fold to this, to be honest.
Doesn't look good, does it?
There's not much really he can do about that. He can go ahead and play out 3-drop.
How much stuff can he get rid of here? I think the answer is quite a bit. I don't think it's enough.
So he could Cold Blood one of the minions to enable both the SI7 agent and the Vile Spine. He could Vile Spine the Annoyatron because it's actually one of the most difficult minions to deal with. Could then SI7 agent into the Giggling Inventor.
Then
2
you
value
double
trades.
bump the other Annoyatron. That doesn't seem that great.
No, there's some potential way to clear up a little bit of this board state.
You might survive 1 turn in the world where Monsanto has nothing, and actually that is the world you're in. The trouble is, using up all those cards, you're in a world where you have nothing as well.
So he's going for this, going to go ahead and SI7 off the Strong Shell, of course, a little bit, you know, more straightforward to deal with. The question is, what is he Vile Spine? I wouldn't be surprised to either see, you know, the Scarab or one of the Annoyatrons. Could just go for the 4/4. That is
taking his Muzzy off. He would have done
Exactly.
better counting than us, because that was something he would have worried about hard.
Strong Shell Scavenger, is that enough?
No. Not for lethal, but is it enough to win the game?
I think it might be enough to win the game. He's going to keep pushing it face. Set up that hero power to be lethal on the following turn. There's no real way Muzzy can deal with this besides some crazy Blink Fox card. I don't think Muzzy drew it, and he's just going to go ahead and give it up. We are going to game number 5.
And Monsanto, who was doing everything but concede in game 3, is a massive favourite to just complete a reverse sweep.
Yeah, I believe the last matchup for Muzzy into Monsanto is
Death Rattle Hunter.
Death Rattle Hunter.
Do you have the list?
I do have the list right here.
Is it just Beasts and King's Crush, or is it something interesting? Not, you know, is it something more off the wall? It looks like Beast, King's Crush. Does have a Ziliax hanging around in there.
Prince Keliseth, you know, the typical 1-drops in Candle Shot, Playdead, and Hunter's Mark. It's got 2 copies of Serenite Chain Gang. That's a little more, you know, adventurous. Other than that, it's got the Grizzly, it's got the Cubes.
Oh, it has got a Mossy Horror.
Does have a Mossy Horror and a Ziliax.
So ways of taking care of one board, maybe just stopping the early onslaught that can beat you. But he's going to need Vexar, he's going to need early board, he's going to need Mossy Horror. He's going to need a lot, basically. These players are 2-0, playing 4 rounds today, so 2-1 is an okay place, but you can't really go more than 2 losses. If one of your losses is to Muzzy or Monsanto, you probably have to just deal with that.
Yeah, I think you're kind of happy if that's one of your losses.
But if you're 3-0, you'll be going to bed with a decent record overnight.
It's going to be interesting to see what Muzzy goes for the mulligan here. I think it's going to be one of the most important parts. You know, keeping the Deathstalker Rexar to make sure he has some kind of answer. One of the ways that Muzzy can potentially win this matchup is not only having Mossy Horror, but also a lot of the times if a Witchwood Grizzly sticks, which is one of the stickiest minions in this Hunter deck, and Muzzy then has the follow-up of Carnivorous Cube Play Dead, Token Druid looks at that and just...
Sure. 36 health of minions to get through. All mine die. And if the Hunter can turn the corner and get it to turn 8 or 9 and not be facing down a wall of nonsense, Rexar gets the job done very quickly. So do Eggs. No ramp again for Monsanto.
Yeah, not looking too good for Monsanto right now. Really needs that wild growth. But for Muzzy right now, getting that Prince Keleseth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the Hunter deck, but it's still nice to have. It's a 2-drop as well. It's just something to do.
It's one of those slots where you know that the Hunter deck isn't really running 2-drops anyways. There's not much that they would want to play in that slot. So why not put the Prince Keleseth in there just for reasons? Why not? It's a very powerful card when drawn. It's kind of like the the Shutterwalk phenomenon where it's played in Shutterwalk Shaman, not because you're tempoing out your opponent with the deck, but because you have the potential to tempo out your opponent with the deck with the proper draws.
And both this and Shutterwalk have tried to play Pyromancers and decided nah. And buffing your Eggs can be helpful. It means that your Play Dead can be used for other things.
Yeah, the issue with Pyromancers in a lot of lists like this is that you force yourself to play more awkward spells than you would want to. Like, for instance, in this deck, you would have to play cards like Grievous Bite, which you really don't want to do. It may be better in matchups like this, but it makes the deck overall weaker.
And then you add Secrets, because why not? And then you might as well be playing Subject 9, Boar Control.
And then you might as well cut the Wild Pyromancers at that
cut
point.
The bad deck,
and just play a different one.
Well, Muzzy has curved out pretty beautifully here. The Handmaster Shore's a big deal. And although this isn't going to be the stuff that gets the job done, it does mean that Monsanto won't be able to get cheeky wideboards as easy as he would have hoped. He's actually going to have to fight for them now.
No, and the fact that, Monsanto didn't have that ramp to do anything, and now Muzzy just has the board state over Monsanto is looking pretty good for Muzzy right now, especially, because what will happen a lot of times is Monsanto may be forced to go in on, say, something like a Spreading Plague, and when Monsanto is forced to do that just to stay alive, there is always a Mossy Horror around the corner. I think that's actually one of the rules of playing Mossy Horror.
They live around corners? Which corner?
I'm trying to think which corner it was. I saw it on a corner one time. I'm trying to remember. I don't know. The corner of Mossy Street and Horror Street.
Sounds good. On the way, on the way to Muzzyville.
On the way to Muzzyland. It's actually the bouncer for Muzzyland.
Oh wow! Just kicks out all the small kids.
You must be this tall to ride
Mossy Horror just on the edge.
The Muzzy Spider Rider.
What's your attack number? 2. Go home.
Yeah, go home.
Well, Muzzy's got an interesting hand to say the least here. All this Death Rattle activation and nothing to activate means he may just be tempted to temp out. Interesting he doesn't want to play the Shore because he hasn't got a minion to play next turn because he wants to play Rexar next turn.
Yeah, I don't think there's any real reason to dedicate to the Handmaster Shaw. I think just trying to clear up that board state, make sure Strong Shell Scavenger isn't really a card. And Monsanto has the option right now
to lose the game.
To lose the That is a funny way to put it, but he might just feel as if he's behind at this point, that he needs to play the Whispering Woods. I don't think that's the case. I think you'd much rather save that for later on with the Soul of the Forest.
No-ish feels good here because you've got... you'd have 8 mana next turn for your Woods and Soul of the Forest. Is that what you just said?
You would have 8 mana for the next turn for the Woods and Soul of the Forest, but you don't have really any follow-up to that. So if you commit to that play, you don't get the maximum 7 Wisps that have that Death Rattle buff, but instead you'll have kind of a little a little bored of them. And
You'd have Power of the Wild to help a little bit.
you do, but then you don't have the refill. But, I mean...
Let's see if he goes for it. He's gone for the ramp because you would anyway most times.
Yeah, if you're Monsanto right now, I think you're behind enough that you might commit to this.
Are you that behind? You're weird sort of behind here.
I think with not drawing with that Nourish, you don't have the resources you would want. You're not that far behind, but it's looking a little sketchy right now.
Did have the option to use the Spellstone if he felt he was miles behind. Chose not to, so he's thinking, okay. And now Muzzy's playing the Shore as a waiting turn because the Mossy Horror can be used next turn. Oh, look how many things he can kill next turn. Most of them. None of your cards work, Monsanto. You have to make them work twice.
Yeah, it's a little rough. And the worst part about it is he could even take the value trades first and then go ahead and play the Mossy Horror to clear up more.
What to do?
Yeah, that pretty much clears the board. Give or take enough. And the reload gets killed by Rexar.
This is looking pretty good for Muzzy right now. I mean, and if you're Monsanto, you almost kind of pigeonholed yourself into this potential line of play. See here, Monsanto's going to go for a different line of play. Just wants to clean up as much as possible. I will say with Monsanto's current hand, he is relying on drawing either a Nourish, a branching for draw, or something like that. If he keeps drawing dead, Muzzy is just going to run over him with...
Well, yeah, with what?
His draws.
That's what I was going to ask you next. Yeah, with his draws, because currently he doesn't have anything that does anything.
He doesn't, but I would say the average draw in the Hunter deck is going to be pressure, whereas the average draw in the Token Druid deck at this point for Monsanto will not be draw itself.
But Monsanto has dodged all the dangers here for the short term, so... But Muzzy's also not falling for it. It's like, okay, we're going to play the waiting game, are we? I can wait.
There's the branching paths. Does help out a little bit. Could opt to draw twice.
Or he could just wait, play the Wisps and put them out of Mossy range.
That is true.
Or put the Soul out of Mossy range. Put things out of Mossy range. Takes a bit of setting up.
The issue with that is you play really into Rexar at that point.
You do, that's the problem. And Muzzy having both of those, and I think Monsanto knows Muzzy's got both, because what else is nothing's happening.
You also saw that Muzzy kept Rexar in the hand.
Yeah, so you know he's got one of those two cards.
So Monsanto's probably thinking it's either Rexar or Mossy Horror.
And then what's the other one that's been there forever? Muzzy's doing very little with his mana.
So is Monsanto.
It's egg time. Means that Muzzy's actually going to be able to, possibly not this turn because he needs to generate some action, but soon start putting lethal on board every single turn.
The question for Muzzy, though, is can he afford to play around a little bit? What if he just leaves this board state up?
Ooh.
I know I'm kind of speaking a little bit of nonsense here.
No, it's always interesting to listen to you speak nonsense.
Thank you, Lorinda. But the one thing is, right now, Muzzy's hand is fairly weak. What he can do is he can put the bow into one of the 1/1s. He can Mossy Horror. He could play dead the Spider, and then push the other 2 face.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
He doesn't really die to anything. He pushes 7 damage face. He can do it this way, too. Either way, it works. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the play. I don't think you take the trades here, because if you take the trades, you're folding over to Ultimate Infestation.
I think he might be going to Rexar so he can use the egg with the Mossy. Now he's
That's
used to
another
play
fair
dead.
point. Or it's the fact that, you know, Rexar cleans up this board state now. Mossy Horror would clean up a Spreading Plague board.
But it won't.
We can see that there's that buff. You are correct. But if the Spreading Plague board comes down later, and there is no buff, and maybe Monsanto's forced to use those buffs in order to draw cards, or he doesn't have a strong shell, Mossy Horror can clear that up, whereas the Rexar would not be able to. So
Also,
I like the use of the Rexar card.
We haven't even mentioned the unsaid obvious thing.
The hero
Rexar
power.
makes you some cards that you urgently need, because your hand is currently Mossy Horror and his breakfast. It's just all there is there.
Is that what you're looking at the egg right now?
Yeah,
You
it just
make it
has
breakfast.
Well, Mossy Horror has it for breakfast.
How do you like your eggs, Lorenzo?
I don't understand American terminology for eggs. Like fried.
All right. Do you prefer over easy? Or
Yeah,
just
this is
grand?
where it gets confusing. Like over easy, what is that?
I don't know. It's over easy.
But yeah, that's what I
how
always
I
ask
order
for, but I don't know what it means. It's just some American
To be honest,
word.
now that you're saying that, I don't know what it means either. I just ask for it.
Talking
pretty
of
good.
over easy, this game might be over pretty easily in a moment. Oh, he
This-
hasn't managed to defend the wisps.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see
Anything?
Devil Sword Egg, Coin, Mossy
I mean,
Horror.
that's what he played for to some extent in that play he made earlier.
I would not be surprised to see that because then you set up lethal with the King Crush.
I won.
Do you like your eggs crushed in the morning? Doesn't sound good.
I like my eggs King Crushed.
And there is lethal set up. And Monsanto's going to need to go into defensive mode again.
Job done.
That was a very important draw right there, Lorinda.
That was a massive draw. That UI has...
That might have just given Monsanto the game here.
You know what it's given him is 2 giggling inventors amongst all the other stuff.
Because right now, Muzzy has this King Crush. It's going to go face. It's going to try and end this game. But Monsanto has the refill. I mean,
Muzzy has almost 0 access to direct damage.
he needs something like Bloat Bat in order to be able to answer a Giggling Inventor board.
Yeah, there's not much else. There's bits and pieces, but there's not much.
I will say that this game is going to grind back and forth for a little bit of time, but if Monsanto can beat the hero powers for 1 to 2 turns, if Muzzy does not get those proper hero powers, it's going to spell game over for him.
Yeah, Monsanto knows that he just needs to be technically correct for the next few turns, and he should get this done. And you are playing around every beast in Hearthstone,
That's a tall order to ask.
but these players are good at that, because we've seen quite a bit of Rexar. I think even I know some of the beast names now.
Only Mossy Horror was a beast. I know you wouldn't be able to select it in the pool.
I have tried to use Mossy Horror with Houndmaster more
Really?
times than I'd like to admit. Yeah, why can't it buff it? What's going on? It looks like
we're
a
gonna
beast.
have to break that habit of yours. Maybe
looks
that's
like
why
a
you're not
beast.
legend.
Look at it.
It does. It's a beast of a card. I'll give you that much.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite cards in Hearthstone. But beast, not quite.
Right. Find
to
a
the
thing.
box. Muzzy's thinking long and hard about the first one. Ironbeak Owl was potentially, the
Yeah.
best take here.
Can you get Echo and Rush with it? Then you'll
Just
be
to
fine.
clear up too
I like Echo Rush Out. It's my favorite beast to build.
the Echo Rush Owl.
Yeah.
Actually, would that be
Not
lethal?
quite, I don't think.
There's the candle shot up. That actually would be lethal if it was the Echo Rush. No, you wouldn't be able to play both in the following turn. It would cost 5 mana.
That's annoying.
If you were able to play both that turn, it would have been lethal.
But no Echo Rush Out available.
And I believe Monsanto most likely has lethal on the follow-up
It's
here.
very
Only one
close.
Savage Roar.
Yeah, he hasn't actually got a lot of the stuff.
You have 2 minions get cleared up here. And I believe that would be a lot of damage. Lorinda, crunch the numbers for me.
It's a lot of damage, you're right.
Good enough for me.
Only 5 minions. That's 12 damage from the Savage Roar.
And currently on board
11.
there is
And there's another
11.
Savage Roar. The
Oh.
damage is now plentiful. Monsanto's going to go to 3-0. Reverse sweeping Muzzy. Every game won by Token Druid in that match. And Token Druid seems to be the way forward. Big cheer goes up from the home crowd. Canada, of course. And Monsanto on 3-0. One more round today, but he's going to have a good night's sleep, whatever.
Yeah, I think being 3-0 right now is, just one of the most important things. You just want to set your pace for the future of the tournament. If you go and lose earlier on, it may not be necessarily a big detriment, but one of the issues you're going to have is that you kind of have that morale loss where you're thinking, wow, I really can't lose a game right now. If I lose a game, I could be out of the tournament. Whereas if you're going 3-0, you're going 4-0, you kind of sit there and you say, you know what? I could lose a game tomorrow. It's all right. I can just keep going.
And that just helps so much with your confidence levels, with
Yes.
the pressure. When you have to make a 50-50 judgment call, when you have to, I don't know, do a soul fire that you know might cost you the game if it goes wrong. It's like, I know this is right. Poof. And then you lose, like, I'm still 4-1.
Or you win because you know you made that
Or you win
gutsy
because
call.
you made the right gutsy call. That is the thing that's the hardest to do under this pressure. We can all do it on ladder, but when it comes to these situations, gutsy calls become really important. So that's the first match of round 3 completed, but we're going to have a quick break and then we're going to cut across to Orange and Swizz, who's made the journey all the way from France, to see what they've got in store for us.